cannot invent and pioneer if you cannot accept failure.
We wanted people that were insanely great at what they did.
Nobody was making any money at all. Most people thought the internet was going to be a fad.
Today on the podcast, Jonathan and I are going to talk about something I've been wanting to nerd out on for a while. And it is getting into the details of these brands, these companies, these software products that have burst onto the scene and exploded because of one reason. It's because they have a celebrity and influencer. They have an unfair advantage with some person that brings to that company an insane following and also a little bit of like brand power. So we've got, I don't know, we'll call it 10 examples of, influencers, celebrities, creators that turned their audience into dollars in creative ways. Because, Jonathan, if you think about it, this is kind of the smart fast track to customer acquisition. We work with a lot of companies. The problem people always run into at the end of the day is top of funnel. How do I get more people, more customers, more clients? And one way to hack that is get a person that already has an audience that you can direct to your product where there's alignment. And that's a shortcut to acquire customers. And I think these are examples of companies that have done it really well.
Yeah, I think if there's like a cheat code or like, you're right, like a smart cut that any person or company could use, it's really identifying that way, that trick to getting distribution, to building an audience. And I think the first time people meet you is going, like, if you introduce yourself in a way that you have a unique identity, you're differentiated, and you have that, your own audience, I think that's definitely a massive advantage. And you're right. And we see this with clients all the time. Like, this is the number one roadblock that almost all companies face. And all the examples we'll cover today have clearly shown that, the ability to first create an audience that's very differentiated and then monetize it in the most creative ways possible. So yeah, excited to talk about it.
Yeah. All right. Let's dive in. And then at the very end, let's do our takeaways of like what we learned from this. So let's start with the big gun. Let's start with Ryan Reynolds, right? So we'll kind of list off some of these accolades and then get into the details. So Ryan Reynolds, he's an actor, he's in Deadpool, he's in a bunch of things. But what is fascinating to me is how he's taken his fandom or his followers and he's taken his kind of creativeness and monetized it in a few different ways. One, Mint Mobile, a mobile company. He owns 25%. He sold that to T-Mobile for $1.35 million. Aviation Gen, he sold to Diageo for $610 million. He has his own creative agency called Maximum Effort. And what's really interesting is, I think what can go wrong with influencers is like, oh yeah, we have this influencer and you do a couple posts, it doesn't work. Like when he partners with these brands or as an owner, he's like, not only am I going to be a partner with it, I'm driving the creative strategy. So his creative agency does that. And we can get into some of their stunts that they did. But what am I leaving? Oh, yeah. And he bought a soccer team, Wexley, that I believe just won their championship. But I mean, that is insane in addition to being an actor.
Yeah. And actually, I didn't know about Mint Mobile and Aviation Gin until very recently. The big move that I was really tracking is his acquisition initially of Wrexham. They're this Welsh club. They're like a non-league team. Or I should say borderline non-league because they're like fifth division. And when they achieve promotion, you reach like the big leagues and begin making money. They acquired them for $2 million, really nothing in the scope of, prices for those types of teams. And the genius behind all of this is they created a partnership with Netflix, where there was like behind the scenes and fly on the wall type footage where fans would follow the happenings. It created a ton of momentum for them. A lot of sponsors suddenly wanted to be part of the Wrexham story because they had a lot of eyeballs on them. And I feel they probably may have I think this is an idea they stole from Formula One. Formula One has this incredibly popular series on Netflix called Drive to Survive. And this is actually a new
Yeah.
trend where companies partner with Netflix. It's almost free distribution. Actually, you're even paid to distribute your content. It's like reality TV quality content. And there are a lot of people that would have never heard of Wrexham, that couldn't care less about soccer or football, whatever you want to call it, that are suddenly following this fifth division Welsh team, and they're climb up the British hierarchy. So it's quite fascinating to watch. I think absolute genius in how they've executed it.
Right. And it's taking his unfair advantage of he has an audience. He's really good at obviously making content and then pairing that with this asset that he bought. So he's monetizing it multiple ways. And what's super impressive is like you've seen, like I think Jerry Seinfeld did some commercials for American Express in the early days. But like Ryan Reynolds, this is taking this up a notch where there's this phrase, and you and I were talking about beforehand. Did he invent this? I don't know if he did. We'll just say he did for now, but he probably didn't. This idea of fast-vertising, where you basically take what is going on in the cultural landscape and within 24, 36, 48 hours, how can you capitalize on that with innovative marketing campaigns, right? And so with his agency, they did a campaign for Match.com where it was during 2020 when everything was blowing up, and it was this funny ad around like basically the devil trying to find a companion. But why it was timely was this was when Taylor Swift was going through all those lawsuits and having to re-record her songs, and they're able to use one of the recordings of her love song on it. So it's one, it's a great ad, but two, it's riding the trend, right? He did the same thing with the Peloton ad with the girl that was kind of I think her name was Monica, where she was kind of made fun of for how she was portrayed in the ad with the look of her face. And within 36 hours, his aviation gym brand did one that's like, hey, here's her after the commercial having Jen like kind of drinking away her sorrows. And then he did the same thing with the Winnie the Pooh copyright right when it was coming up. He wrote a book, Winnie the Screwed, around Mint Mobile and did that. And that just shows like, I mean, this dude is next level, like having the speed and the chops to create that and do that. And so for me, it's like he is the top of the pyramid with creators finding innovative ways to latch onto brands and then, grow it in an innovative way.
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about fast-vertising is that it immediately adds personality, especially to boring things, products or services. It's like when you're almost parodying or coattailing on something that everyone else is talking about, you become the talk of the town. People want to talk about that interesting thing you do. You just stand out. You're like the purple cow. And I think one thing I definitely want to say about this as well is like if you feel this is out of reach, like obviously it's Ryan Reynolds, Hollywood actor, if he could pull this off. There's the example of like Harry Dry, and I know you discussed in the past, Jim, where he built it, actually didn't even build it. He just built the landing page or the concept for a Kanye West dating app when Kanye West was the most talked about person. And it finally somehow trickled up to Kanye West and his people. And they ended up actually even promoting that dating app that didn't even exist, actually. It was still a concept. So there's definitely a lot of legs here for like guerrilla type marketing and just, coattailing on things that are trending and, adding your own personal spin or personality to it. So just fascinating. Yeah.
Should we launch a fast-vertising agency where we just look at what's trending and then we jump on trends with brands? I mean, someone should launch that and that would probably do extremely well. You just kind of need the creative chops and the speed to do something innovative.
Absolutely. And I don't think many people are doing it. And I know the few that do it like tend to get really outsized returns for their effort. It's like, if you think of some of the best D2C brands and how they've launched over the past, let's say, decade, if you take Dollar Shave Club, it's a really an outrageous video where the person has personality and kind of parodies things that people are already familiar with. It immediately creates a villain for you as well to target. In that case, was Gillette, and just it's really a superpower if someone really knows how to execute that. That's for sure.
All right, so I think he gets an A+ on what he has done. I don't know what his net worth is. I'm sure we could Google and get something interesting, but it's got to be insane. All right, what do you have next on creators that have been innovative and how they monetize their audience?
The next person I have is Doug DeMuro. Yeah, he's I think the best word to describe him is a really weird guy. he's not your typical car reviewer. I know I grew up on BBC's Top Gear was my favorite show when I was growing up. It was the way you'd, get to learn about cars, but with personality and a comedic take on reviewing cars. It wasn't just stale. And he's kind of done the same thing, but with a very bare bones operation. He's built his YouTube channel to almost 5 million subscribers at this stage. He still to this day uses just an iPhone to review cars and has built a super loyal following, again, mostly because of his unique personality. And this is something that we'll come to later on when we get to the takeaways. But personality is really important. And he's taken this and rolled it into, he's deplatformed his audience from YouTube to create Cars and Bids. It's a platform for car enthusiasts. So this is not your average person trying to buy a Honda for commuting. It's the person who wants, the 92 model, Toyota Supra or something like that. And it's built a huge following. And the company has grown dramatically. I think they've had over 10,000 auctions since launch. And it happened just around the start of COVID. And if you know what happened with the car market in 2020, just completely exploded. And so did Cars and Bids. And they've raised $37 million, sold to a private, that stake was sold to a private equity company. And I think the fascinating part about this, the backstory when I was doing some research is there's an entrepreneur who kind of latches on to these trends and, influencers who already built the most difficult thing about a business, which is distribution and an audience, and builds the company that latches on to that person, that identity. And this entrepreneur is now, partnering with Doug DeMuro to build up this big company. I think this is one of those companies that could easily hit, unicorn status if it's, properly executed. And that's something that they're doing right now. So fascinating how a single person with an iPhone can outrank a huge, show that's been running for over 30 years, probably at this stage, with the funds of BBC. So it's crazy how that's possible in this day and age with YouTube and all these other platforms.
Yeah, it's worth calling out that, again, he does it with his iPhone. And I think why it works is, one, his personality, and he knows his audience. Because I was listening to an interview, maybe it was My First Million that he did, around what worked really well for him was, because he was doing cool old vintage cars. He started with his cars and that, but then he started doing new cars and basically reviews on what people are thinking of buying. And he does it in a way where it's what people care about. And that's when things really took off, because I think it's easy. It's if I'm going to do a YouTube channel, I need to have the best camera, the best lighting, all this. But he really just focused on the actual content and what people wanted. And he just has taken that to a whole nother stratosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. This one's one to watch. I think we'll definitely be talking more about him. And I think this is the model for a lot of YouTube creators nowadays, where you take your passion, that thing that you talk about, and you build a company on the side. And you've already, identified the audience, and you could literally outcompete established giants. In this case, other companies where cars are sold. So fascinating to watch.
Yeah, we'll come back to takeaways, but I think he chose the right market too, because people will pay a lot of money to you if you're going to give reviews to buy a Honda versus a Hyundai versus a Tesla or something. So I'm going to bundle the next two, because I think it align. There's two big ones that people know about, but I think it's worth bundling them, because I think they chose the right product, even though one might be a little more saturated now. But obviously, George Clooney and what he did with Casamigos, selling that for $1 billion, and why I think that's the right product. He was forever the Bachelor's Bachelor, sexiest man in the world, living this amazing lifestyle, pairing that with a tequila that supports that lifestyle, right? So it's the right product creator fit. The other one with that is obviously Dr. Dre and Beats by Dre, where, who better to make a high quality headphone and thanks to the use case than Dr. Dre, not to mention the network that he has for it. Because I think a lot of times people might just do a product to do a product, but you want it to align with that aspirational lifestyle or the specialty of the person. And those are two where it looks very obvious now that they did that really well. Then you see a lot of people that kind of started to copy them, as far as oh, I need to have my own alcohol brand.
Yeah, that's That's definitely fascinating. You are right, though. I think the person and the product that they decide to launch, I think, has to be a perfect match. If Dr. Dre was going to release sneakers, I don't necessarily think that would have worked. But in that case, yeah, you're totally right. That's fascinating. Only he can produce, as a producer, high quality headphones. So totally makes sense.
Nice. All right, what do you have next?
Person I have next is probably the most impressive one, I think, on this list. And I found out about this very late, actually. Reese Witherspoon started her book club in 2017. Really wanted to recommend some like overlooked books that she was passionate about, like that had like, very like heroines and, stories that she really wanted to promote. And she's since grown the book club to 2.5 million subscribers, maybe even more. Now has obviously an email list, not just on Instagram. And the trick here is that she's used that leverage to negotiate exclusive rights. She shops that around to major platforms, like all of them, from Netflix to Disney Plus. And then without using any of her money, she gets them to commit to the production of the content. And keep in mind that those authors that she's promoting on her huge platform, she signs exclusive rights to convert those books or stories into shows or movies. And she has exclusive rights. She shops that around, uses other people's money to produce it. And then, obviously streams it on all these platforms. And she sold that production company for over $1 billion. And what makes this fascinating is just how this is a hobby. She is just the connector in all of this. She's not necessarily doing anything. She's just sharing books that she finds interesting. She's obviously leveraged her popularity to build the newsletter, the book club. But she takes other people's money to build the shows. As someone from Hollywood, that gives her a lot of credibility as well with many of these platforms. And she negotiates exclusive rights with all these stories that she is making popular at the same time. So like those rights become more valuable the moment she decides to feature that book, because she's, putting it in front of 2.5 million subscribers, and like passionate subscribers as well. So this is really, I think, one of the few incidents I've seen someone really taking a passion and converting it into billions in the most efficient way possible without really, risking any capital in any of these steps. And it's just fascinating. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive too. Like just having the audience, you're going deeper in your relationship with them with the book recommendations. You're creating that reoccurring connection, and it becomes the byproduct of you wanting to find amazing scripts and content that you would want to make into movies. I get really impressed when people can combine different things that they're doing. All right, the next one that I have, I'd say this is like a 1-2 punch. I might butcher this name, so I apologize. I think it's Vani Hari, who she had this massive blog around the Food Babe, where she like led this crusade for healthy food and clean ingredients, where she was monetizing in all the traditional ways a creator would, where with cookbooks and meal plans and affiliates. Well, what she did was like, let me launch my own kind of health supplement company with plant-based protein and everything. But she also partnered with Derek Halpern, who was like an OG in direct response digital marketing, where they become this dream team to build this like 8-figure, approaching 9-figure, essentially like health food supplements company. And so I think one, it's like going outside the norm of like monetizing from e-products to having a real product, but two, finding the right partners for collaboration is super impressive here. Because I mean, I see them everywhere in all the grocery stores, and I think they've been around for maybe 3 years. So that's one that I kind of look to as a blueprint.
Interesting. I didn't know they were actually had distribution to grocery stores already. That's fascinating.
Oh yeah, I get my Trevani every week at Metro Market here in Magnolia.
Fascinating. The next person is actually, I think everyone knows, Kim Kardashian. And the reason I think I call this one out is just as an example of someone who stopped doing licensing in the past when she initially had popularity and fame. It's quick cash. It's I think an efficient way to leverage popularity to make money. But I think her shift to equity deals has made it fascinating. Where I think the examples is with Skims. She did a collaboration with Fendi, and obviously. Driving urgency, they sold out millions of dollars worth of inventory in just 60 seconds. And it got me thinking, as I was doing some research on this, like Imagine if the Jordan brand was an equity deal where he owned the brand outright and just continued growing it over the years. Imagine where that would be. Right now, he just gets a share of revenue, which is still a sizable amount. I think it's like $250 million a year, plus or minus, based on current revenue. But this is a new trend, or I wouldn't say new trend, but I think a shift where people are becoming more business savvy and have shifted to doing more equity deals. And with that, even a small exit on even mediocre revenue can definitely give you outsized returns. But in the case of previous people who built huge brands, I think George Foreman as well, don't necessarily get the same level of payout. So it's something to keep in mind. Jim, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, what I was saying is what's interesting at the time with Jordan, like it was kind of innovative where they did that deal with Nike because it was a rev share. And then, now we see people that are just launching their own brands and having full ownership. But no, it's interesting to see the evolution. So as I was going through this, all my examples were B2C. I was like, I want to find good B2B examples. And I'm listening to, they aren't big, but I think they're super interesting where there's two people, Brennan Dunn and Nathan Barry. These are people that were like B2B creators. Nathan Barry had his book Authority, and he had a lot of good content on his blog about building apps. Brennan Dunn was really big in kind of like, the agency world and lead generation. And they both were able to take their audience and following and then build a software product that aligned with their content and what people were reading. With Brennan Dunn, it's Right Message, which is a personalized software tool. And then Nathan Barry, obviously ConvertKit, an email tool for creators that now is doing 30 million in revenue. And so while it's not like they're Kim Kardashian, have huge followings, I think they did a phenomenal job on landing the plane on what is the right product or software to build for their audience that they could then monetize. And so for me, those two, I look at that, I'm like, okay, great kind of founder product fit.
Actually, one that's B2B or maybe even B2C to some extent is software company is ClickFunnels, Russell Brunson. I've been studying him for quite a while. What makes him fascinating, I remember even him documenting the process of building the software. And they went from 0 to 7 figures within like on launch, really right out of the gate. They just have so much authority in their space as direct marketers, and they built a huge following that it was a no-brainer for them to build that tool. And they've since acquired Magnetic Marketing by I forget the name of it, something Kennedy. I can't believe I'm forgetting his first name.
Dan Kennedy?
Dan Kennedy, thank you.
Yeah.
Almost Kennedy. But and they've taken all that material, added it as lead magnets and top of funnel, like ways of attracting the right people. And they at the bottom of the funnel, it's selling them ClickFunnels subscriptions, and they've built an unbelievable business doing that. I think it's on path, or if not already, a unicorn. So just fascinating to watch that.
That's a really good one because they did that before, Nathan and Brennan. I mean, ClickFunnels is huge. He has that annual conference where you get to hold the plaque on stage for how many people you tricked into upselling. So yeah, well done there. Okay, cool. I think you have a couple more here. What do you have? Or you have one more, that's a big
one more. Yeah, Mr. Beast. Obviously, they're products that he's well known for. I should say services. Feastables and Beast Burger, which is really one of the greatest innovations in like food retail. But I think even more impressive than that, I think, is there's this company behind them and other creators as well called Spotter. They're a VC for creators. They buy the music catalogs of well-known artists like Bruce Springsteen and many others, even Bob Marley, if I'm not mistaken. And they've also now spending a lot more time and energy in acquiring the back catalog of YouTubers. So Mr. Beast sold, significant portion of his back catalog to them for a large sum of money. It helped finance his Spanish learning channel. and that grew his viewership by 300%, which obviously generated more revenue for him. But now he has taken that service of converting his content into a Spanish channel and many other languages, by the way, and now offering that as its unique service to other creators. So other creators are using Mr. Beast's service to grow into these other languages that have huge populations. And what they're actually doing is like the voice actors are the types of the person who'll be doing Spider-Man in let's say Spanish or something like that. And they're hiring him to do the voiceover for Mr. Beast video. And that's generating a ton of revenue. And that's now become a new service with, enormous upside potential. So it's just fascinating how he's managed to convert one success into, several rounds of success back to back. But yeah, one of the best examples for sure.
Yeah, that one, talk about one that like gets into the cultural landscape over and like creates a trend. Like his stuff is huge. So let's pick on some celebrities or creators that are under monetizing their audience. I'll go. Actually, I'll let you go first on this one. Who do you want to pick on first?
The first person that came to mind actually was Joe Rogan, and that's because I know he's obviously made a ton of money, moving to Spotify, and he has forget the name of the brand, but something that he's launched with Aubrey Marcus. That's I think doing well into the 9 figures as well. But he is the Oprah of this generation, and he should definitely be building and owning and operating things like many times the scale that he currently is doing. He has a massive loyal audience of probably the most valuable demographic. And I think it's completely underutilized. I think he could be doing a lot more with that. But again, maybe that's not something he's trying to optimize for. And that's not, his biggest priority. And I would say in that bracket would be like a Tim Ferriss, someone who also has pretty much the same or similar audience. And he's built it over a very long time with an enormous reputation. And I feel he's kind of under monetized and maybe even gone under the radar a little bit, at least recently, I would say for sure.
Yeah. And I feel like Joe Rogan, obviously he could do an amazing supplements kind of health company. Tim Ferriss, I feel like he should have started Shopify or some sort of like equivalent to go from employee to entrepreneur. One that I had, I just try to push myself on like the B2B. I'll do 2 real quick. The Acquired Podcast guys. They have an amazing podcast that has not the biggest audience, but maybe the most valuable. They should be launching essentially the equivalent of Micro Acquired or Acquire, a SaaS tool, a platform to find and buy companies. That would be, I think, an amazing opportunity for them because they're obviously doing a great job monetizing through ad revenue and through their community. But I think there's a huge software play here. The other B2B one I'll go with is Ben Thompson of Stratechery, that has probably the go-to newsletter in tech that has all the, VC companies and whatnot on it. Like he should be doing a modern day version of either like Bloomberg and the Bloomberg terminals or like CB Insights with what he's doing. So I think that one might be the biggest like under monetization opportunity there, if that's even a phrase or a word. But who else do you have?
I'll jump into sports for a bit, and I would say 2 of the GOATs in by far the most popular sport in the world, Messi and Ronaldo. Again, they go back into doing a lot of licensing and one-off brand deals, but they really haven't built anything with equity. They have one of the most devoted follower base in the world, people that literally fall their knees to kiss their feet, which no one else gets that kind of treatment nowadays. And it's a global audience. So I think that's definitely something they've definitely both under monetized for sure. And then another person I would call next to them.
Well, you got to pitch an idea. What would you monetize if you're them?
A shoe brand or something like that. Something that they own that is exclusively theirs, right? Like the Jordan version, but for soccer.
Yeah.
Or something related to that, quite frankly. I think it could be anything. They could move into any space. They have such name recognition that they don't even have to stay in sports. Seriously. They could establish, I don't know. It could be anything, quite literally anything under the sun, and it would sell like hotcakes. Virat Kohli is he's an Indian cricket player. Actually, I'm sure like no one in the West really knows him. Cricket is one of the most popular sports in the world, just because the few countries that really passionately follow it have high population, like you're talking India, Pakistan, and things like that. And he has a higher or a bigger Instagram follower than LeBron James, for example. I think this is one of the highest, like one of the most followed people in the world. And very similar in the whole Messi Ronaldo thing, where I feel he's maybe under monetized his name recognition and equity and on all of that. So again, and he's also the type of person, at least in that sphere where he's known, it's definitely limited. It's not as expansive as a Messi or Ronaldo, but I don't feel has monetized that either.
Yeah, man, I didn't realize I've got to look outside my little window of the US. That's insane.
Yeah.
All right, I'll rattle off my final three. I think you're going to have opinions on this first one. First is James Clear. Love his newsletter, love Atomic Habits. That dude he doesn't even monetize his newsletter. That guy is leaving so much money on the table. He's very thoughtful, and so there's probably a good reason why. He needs a product. I think he needs a wearable product, like a habits tracker is what he should be doing. Or it's some sort of a mattress or a cold plunge tank. I don't know. The second one, Taylor Swift. I mean, good Lord. Like, I would argue she has the most engaged audience or passionate one. This one is obvious. She needs to launch a Ticketmaster competitor, and she starts with her audience and any other Swiftie performers. That's a big one. And then the final one I have is Bill Simmons, formerly of ESPN of Grantland. He then had The Ringer. He sold that, I think, for $250 million to Spotify for his whole podcast network. But that guy should be having essentially DraftKings or some sort of gambling website is what he should be doing. So anyway, those are my final three of creators with under-monetized audiences.
You know, if Taylor Swift's audience were of voting age, she could definitely run for president, in my opinion. Without doubt. And it would be a landslide. And actually, the other person I was thinking of mentioning is actually Donald Trump. And it sounds foolish to say this about a billionaire who's already achieved a ton of success. But with his level of, like followership, can you imagine? Like, I know of a few veterans and things like that have built huge brands around, the conservative base, and they built 9 figures and things like that. But I know this Donald Trump is definitely probably not optimizing for this at this stage of his life and his career and his success. But I feel like there's just so much more that could have been done there. But yeah, that's another person I'll throw in there, although that's probably a bit controversial.
Well, what's funny, he started as a business person and then obviously built his audience. I mean, he had Trump Steaks, Trump Academy, obviously, commercial real estate and hotels. He has Truth Social. He's got a social platform. So I don't know how that's performing. I need to create my handle.
Yeah.
maybe I'll get on that. Yeah. Okay, let's do our takeaways from this. So it's okay, that's great, Jim and Jonathan, how these people that have millions of followers, how they monetize it. What are the big takeaways here? What do you want to start with?
I recently heard a YouTube creator, Dan Koh, say that everyone is really a category of one, and everyone really has a unique story and advantage and a perspective. And if people were to really follow that to the extreme and create something of value for the rest of the world to follow, then I think it's definitely possible to create business out of it. There's this person on YouTube that I used to follow. I couldn't find him when I did the research, but he used to review and create his own slingshots, and that was his fascination. I believe he was either German or Austrian, and he had this little shed in the back of his home where he just sit there and make it and shave it down and just demonstrate using it. And he had a loyal following where people would order the slingshots, the custom slingshots he was making, and he was building a sizable business. And it's so possible where if slingshot makers in remote parts of Germany and Austria can build massive businesses, I think everyone has a shot. And I think I've seen enough on the internet where there's city planners, for example, for small town cities in America, creating content about their unique findings and their day-to-day experience and work, that have built huge followings, and now they kind of give career guidance to other people. They built businesses out of this. And I think this is probably the most promising thing, I think, about the world going forward. I feel like everyone has a chance of creating their own mini brand and building something that's exciting. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to be the next Ryan Reynolds or Reese Witherspoon, but I think in our own unique worlds, we can definitely create something. And I think the greatest threat to this obviously is like people trying to be conformists and wanting to be like everyone else instead of really standing out and feeling comfortable in their own skin. But I think if there's definitely a big opportunity there. That's the one thing that came across to me as we were doing research here.
Yeah, and that's super interesting. And I also like with your example with Doug DeMuro with cars and bids, it's like go where the money is. Guess what? If you're reviewing which car to buy, and someone's going to make a $20,000, $40,000, $100,000 purchase, you can bet that the manufacturers and all the other stakeholders involved are going to want to like give you ad revenue or eventually buy you. The other one is maybe go B2B rather than B2C, because while the audience can be smaller, I think the monetization at the end of it could be just as big as some of those D2C or B2C ones, because that's such a different level of scale you have to achieve when you're selling, products that are $50 to $100 versus selling SaaS or software as a service or other things. And then the final one was we had someone on this podcast, Craig Swanson, where he would look for creators that had a massive audience that had not yet been monetized with e-products or other products. And that was people he would partner with, because like these people knew how to create amazing content, build a following, but they didn't know how to monetize it. So maybe you don't have to build the audience. You become that monetization engine that you could bolt on to. And I think that is a really interesting opportunity for people to partner with creators.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the head, Jim. That's probably one of the best takeaways for sure, is if you already go to someone who's already built that audience, you've kind of cut out the most difficult part of that business building process. The last one I think I would say is like, I think we need to transition or pivot into a fast-vertising agency. It's like, there's just so much opportunity there. It's the one thing that everyone craves is that audience. And I think that's a skill set we should definitely start thinking about.
I know, as we want to do these stunts, we should really you can even try and predict trends. It's like, okay, the Super Bowl is coming up. There's going to be some crazy things going on there. It's like, okay, there's going to be heat waves going on in New York in the summertime, or like what are those trends? You could just kind of be prepared for it. Obviously, some are very unpredictable, but I think that's stuff that would be really fun. We got to try and pull off a stunt around some sort of fast-vertising tactic.
It might even be worth doing like research, like what is the best marketing stunt agency? Do you know by any chance? Or a firm? Or
I have no idea if that's even a thing.
Yeah, I don't think that's a thing. I don't think there's a firm that necessarily specializes in just creating stunts for brands to get as many, mentions or, eyeballs or impressions as possible. I mean, it's a huge opportunity if you think about it, right? It costs so little, yet the upside is so high. It's taking an asymmetrical bet every time you put something out. I feel like anyone that deserves a significant portion of marketing spend if you think about it.
So here's what you do. You're like, we're a fast-vertising agency. You signed a 12-month contract to have us on call. Some months we do nothing. Other months we are prepared to go big. We charge like $40K a month, and we just do 2 to 5 stunts a year. And we have no guarantee on results or metrics, but we will be your fast-vertising agency. And then we need to have some really good copywriters, some video editors, and some people on call to pull this stuff off.
That sounds like the dream. Yeah, so let's do it.
All the money, no responsibility of delivering metrics. Yeah.
Be off for 2 months straight. You want to hear from us? That's the dream right there.
All right. We'll see if we can pull it off. Well, cool, man. Well, this was a fun one. Well, awesome, man. We'll talk to you later.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim.